We're going to go ahead and get rolling. Thanks for confirming that the sound is good. And thank you so much for joining us tonight for our first webinar of this school year. We're diving right in with a really fun topic. We're going to explore children's books and how we can use stories to teach science in elementary schools. Before we get too far along, I just do want to take a couple moments to talk about some Zoom options. If you've been using other platforms, you might not know that you can exit out of full screen if you prefer not to have full screen open. And I actually recommend that you do that. This way you can dock the chat window to the side of your screen and you can participate in conversations that happen there. To do that, you're going to want to exit the full screen view, and then you're going to want to hit the chat window, looks like a little speech bubble icon. And then over here where you type your text, make sure that you're sending to everyone. This will allow us to have a conversation with each other, and you can share tips and tricks with each other as we go along. Definitely encourage conversation and sharing in the chat windows. And please feel free to put questions there as well as we go through the evening. So my name is Kelly Schaefer, and I'm coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. I'm with our K-12 education team, and I am joined today by Steph, who is in the chat window. She's going to be our link guru and our question guru, and she'll help me keep track of your questions as we go along and share relevant links. So don't worry if you don't catch everything that I'm sharing. It'll all be in the chat window. We're also recording this session, so you will be able to view the recording, and we'll be sending out a follow-up email with that link, as well as all the relevant links to the topics and resources that I share tonight. So here at the K-12 education team, we create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through birds, nature, participatory science, and inquiry. And today we're really going to be talking about kind of those birds and nature pieces and how that can help us build nature connection. So a lot of our resources and our trainings come back to these three pillars: nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. Today, we're going to be focusing a lot on that nature connection piece because children's books can provide such a really wonderful window into diving into this topic. So we're going to go ahead and look at some of our free educators guides to children's trade books today. So I'm going to feature 3 books today, and we'll discover some of the ideas and activities in them to help us ignite an excitement for science and nature, because stories can be such a powerful way to do that. So before I get too far into it, I'd love to throw this question out to you. What do you like about teaching with children's books? What attracted you to this webinar? What do you find powerful about teaching with children's books? Lynn's mentioning the illustrations. A lot of times there's so much rich extra information in the illustrations, even beyond what's in the story. If you dive into those, you can pull out even more cool details, and they're often just so enriching. Oops, we went back one. There we go. You can connect or relate anything to a book. Yes, absolutely, Jennifer. If you're teaching a topic, there's probably a book out there for you. It helps with visualization. There's a variety of ways to show pictures and illustrations. Those pictures can help convey messages. Linda's saying that there can be really relatable examples in books, and I think that's a great point too. Vianne, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, is saying that books are immediately engaging for kids and that they are a great jumping off point. Yeah, so they can provide this exciting entry point into a topic we want to explore in a really accessible way and a visual way. There's so many great responses coming into the window. I'm so excited to see folks who are excited about storybooks too. And I love this idea that they draw you in with cool visuals and illustrations. They provide relatable examples for us to talk about almost any topic. And they provide some great jumping off points for further activities to explore these topics. So there's more coming in, and um, feel free to share more ideas as you go, but I think we've hit some of the really big highlights. And as I was thinking about this webinar, I was poking around in some research, and I found some studies that were basically just confirming a lot of the things that we talked about. One was looking at kind of a review of a bunch of different studies, and I pulled out a couple things from that about some of the benefits of teaching with children's books. And one of the things that they brought up is a lot of research shows that reading well-chosen children books in the classroom can help stimulate critical thinking and reasoning, stimulate your imagination, improve memory, build observation skills, all while building these really critical language skills. And to me, I like to think of stories, they're just part of who we are. They're ways that we have communicated across cultures throughout time. Stories have been a way of passing on important information. And when we read these stories with our kids, we tap into like this rich history of using stories as a way to learn and understand the world. And as so many of you pointed out, they're just really naturally engaging. So they can help us make all sort of connections from our classrooms to our lives and build on what we're learning in the classroom. And I just threw in this Albert Einstein quote that I find enjoyable. If you want your children to be intelligent, tell them fairy tales. If you want your children to be more intelligent, tell them more fairy tales. I just like this idea that there's so much that we can learn from stories about ourselves and our world. But I sound like I'm preaching to the choir here. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about some of our free educators guides. So we have a ton of guides on our website that use children's books to encourage reading, writing, and art skills and science skills, and to inspire nature connection and outdoor exploration. So there's usually activities in all of these guides that get kids outside and in really fun ways. So for your reference, our book guide pages are broken down by grade band. So on the left-hand side of the page here, I have our snapshot of our K2 book guides. And then we also have our 3-5 book guide page. And Steph is going to share the links to both of those in the chat windows for you. And you'll notice that there's a variety of books. Some of them are older books, and some of them are books that the Cornell Lab Publishing Group put out. Just a heads up for you, the Lab's Publishing Group doesn't really exist anymore, but we are moving these books to a different printing group. So if at any point you want to buy one of these books and you're not seeing that it's out there, if it was a Cornell published book, they'll be back. We might just be a little bit of a pause. But the books that I'm featuring today all have read alouds online. So even if you can't get your hands on them, you can still see the book. So each of our guides, when you pick on the book you're interested in, you'll open up a new page that will share information about the guide with you. It'll tell you what age group the guide is targeted to, It'll have a link to where you can purchase the book. Right now we're linking to Amazon because that's with Cornell Lab Publishing Group on pause. That's where they are living at the moment. And then where you can download the guide, which has all of these great activities that we'll be talking about. And so these guides are available for free. So lots of great activities to pull from here. Our guides are also standards aligned, and because children's books lend themselves so well to so many different topics, you'll notice that there's science standards, English language arts, mathematics, and art standards included in these activities. Some of the guides will have the standards listed out on the very front of the page. Some other ones will have the detailed standards listed on the web page. So if you get one guide that doesn't have the detailed standards on it, they are on the bottom of the web page. So they're still out there. Okay, so as we go through these activities, keep your eyes out for where we're talking about art, where we're talking about language, and where we're talking about science. I think you'll see those pop up a lot in the books that we discuss. I want to start out by jumping in with Ruby's Birds. Ruby's Birds is a really fantastic book. It is really charming story about a young girl who goes to Central Park with her friends, and she hears a warbler for the first time. And it sparks this excitement for birds that she then shares with her family. And it shows how birding can become a community and family activity. And so we're really lucky that actually the head of our department, Maya Thompson, wrote this book, and we have a really great read aloud for it. So it's only a few minutes long. I am going to play the read aloud for us just because I think that it'll be useful to see how we approach our book guides. So it is available through PBS, and it is linked on the Ruby's Birds page that Steph just shared. So we're going to go ahead and exit out of that screen, and hopefully right now you are seeing the video screen. Can anybody confirm that you're seeing the video screen for me? Just want to make sure I shared my screen correctly. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get to hear about Ruby's Birds from Maya.
Hi, I'm Maya Thompson, and I'm here to read to you a book called Ruby's Birds. This is a book I wrote and Claudia Davila illustrated. So here we go. School's out. Mom and Dad are at work. My brother Malik is at soccer practice. Grandma's at her spot near the window. Alex keeps her company. Things are too quiet around here. I know what to do. I play the piano, the piece my parents say is very grown up. I practice my dance routine, the one Malik calls stomping. I talk with Alex in the secret language Grandma taught us. I sing at the top of my lungs the song I made up myself. My neighbor Eva from downstairs hears everything. She calls up from her window, "Ruby, want to go to the park?" "Yes, yes, 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 yes," I sing. We pass my favorite bakery. We pass Cece's apartment. We walk right past my regular park, the one with the twisty slide and the sprinklers. I guess Eva's going to a different park. I skip to keep up. I follow her all the way to Central Park, where my parents sometimes take us on Sundays when we're all dressed up. Eva's going into the woods. I've never been that way. We sing made-up songs about joggers and strollers and fancy dogs. Suddenly, Eva stops. She looks up. She's listening. Bee, buzz, buzz, buzz. Bee, buzz, buzz, buzz. I quiet down and I listen too. What's wrong, I wonder? I hear a police car, a plane, some barking. I tug on Eva's sleeve, but she's not paying attention. She holds her binoculars up to her eyes. She's frozen like a statue. And then she smiles, a huge smile. I guess everything's okay, so I start singing again. Oh, Ruby, Eva sighs, you scared him away. Who did I scare away, I ask. Eva flops down on a bench. I sit too. It's a bird I've only ever seen back home in Costa Rica, she says. He's just stopping through on his way north because this is the best patch of woods for miles around. He's quite a singer, just like you. If you stay quiet, we may be able to find him again. He's a golden-winged warbler. I nod. I don't say a word, or sing a word either. It sounds like something from a fairy tale. We move carefully. We're serious. We pay attention. We watch for tiny movements in the leaves. We try and try. No luck today, says Eva, but now you know what to do. I sing myself to sleep as usual. On Sunday morning, I beg for a walk to Central Park. Malik's not interested, but it's family time, so he has to come anyway. We pass the bodega. We pass the theater. I sing my song. My family listens along. At the park, I lead them straight into the woods. I'm silent. I'm serious. I'm paying attention. I hear a rustle in the leaves. Shh, I say. Just like Eva, I'm frozen like a statue. A tiny bird pops out of the leaves. It looks one way, then the other, then right at me. I can't help it. I get that huge smile just like Eva's. Look, I yell. Ah, yes, says Grandma. I saw a warbler, I sing as he flies away. So that's our story. And I want to tell you a little bit more.
So that is Ruby's Birds. I'm going to stop it there, but Maya does go in to read another section of the book, which is also really great, and it gets into the idea of migration and dives into some of the other birds you see illustrated in the story as well. So I want to throw out to you these questions. So we just heard this great story. We got to see some of the illustrations. What stood out to you about the art or the story of Ruby's Birds? What sort of topics or ideas would you pick out that you could explore with your students? Donna noticed that there were some great birds in there. Yeah, there's in the back of the book, it shows that there's it's either 14 or 18, I'm not remembering the number exactly, different birds illustrated in the story. Jordan's noticing that you could ask questions about what she passed on the way to the park, like the bodega. Wendy's pointing out that this shows that nature can be found in urban settings too. Sabrina's saying how to use your senses to observe the world around us, learning observation skills. Yes, so we actually heard Ruby do a really good job describing what you need to do to be able to see birds, right? Standing still like a statue, being quiet, paying attention, looking for small movements in the leaves. Linda's also pointing out that the story shares that enthusiasm is contagious. I love that. Eva's big smile got passed on to Ruby. Lynn's pointing out that Costa Rica was mentioned, so you could share Costa Rica and New York on a map. So it also brings in this idea of migration, right? So even without really using the word, because we hear Eva's story, we know that she saw this bird in Costa Rica and now it's just passing through. So you can dive into this idea of migration. Irene saying we can see ourselves in Ruby. Yeah, I love this story for that reason. Ruby's super relatable. And I love that she shared her what she learned with her family as well. So there's lots of really amazing things that we can pull out from this story. And some of the topics we chose to focus on for the guide, one of the big ones was migration, but we also looked at bird diversity, which actually I think somebody brought up in the chat window as well. So let's dive into the guide a little bit, and we'll talk about a couple of the activities, and you'll see how they tie into the story as we learned in. So the first activity I'll talk about is the migration game. So this dives into that idea of the golden wing warbler traveling from Costa Rica and passing through on its way north. So in this game, you can designate one part of the room as south and one part as north, and the challenge is for the students to make a successful migration. And the way the game is set up is choosing a characteristic of different students. So like wearing particular sneakers or a particular color or hair up or hair down, things like that. If you don't want to do it that way, there's other ways to do it as well. But it's basically a step forward or step back or sit down game. And so some of the things that are helpful for migration are the step forward things. So things like helpful tailwinds, having a good diet, availability of water along the journey, habitat to stop in, um, and whether or not you were able to leave early. And some of these things you can kind of even point out, we see in the book, like the Central Park was the only patch of forest around for a while. So that's why the golden wing warbler stopped there to refuel on its journey north. Things that would lead to stepping back are bad weather, headwinds, getting sick along the way, hitting a window. Um, and so you can have your students kind of even brainstorm some of these ideas with you before diving into the game and thinking about what can help a bird along the migratory pathways and what can be a detriment. Um, and then there are some that are sit downs, so they kind of end the game. So running into a cell tower, getting eaten by a bird, or blown out into the ocean. And this game really does a good job of kind of bringing home that migration is really challenging and that there are things that we can do in our own lives to help migratory birds. So for example, one of the things that you can do in cities, and there are some initiatives like this on cities along migratory pathways, is turn out non-essential lights on heavy migration nights. There are some cities in Texas that have adopted this. It's called Lights Out Texas, and they actually will keep an eye on the radar, and on heavy migration days, a lot of buildings will turn out all their non-essential lights. And that can really help birds. So there's things that we can do to help birds along their migration journeys. Sometimes it's just preserving some habitat along the way and making sure that there's good habitat. So you could even turn this into an opportunity to look at your own schoolyard and what does that provide in terms of habitat needs for birds. So this is a fun activity, exploring the challenges of flight, taking wings. So I don't know, you may have done versions of this activity before where you can explore different flight styles of different birds, whereas a hummingbird bird might have so many beats per minute. This is really looking at the flight efficiency of soaring versus flapping. So this is getting back into this idea of migration. So during migration, birds like raptors will soar because it conserves a lot of energy. Right now, my mind is getting drawn to the story of whooping cranes, and I don't want to get too off topic, but for example, whooping cranes are an endangered species, and they were removed from the Midwest and only existed in the western part of the country for a while. And there's been an effort to reintroduce them. And originally they had to follow ultralight aircraft to help them learn their migratory pathways again because there was nobody for them to learn from. And this was a really unnatural way for them to fly because they had to flap their wings. And that was really a much more energy intensive way. Now that there are whooping cranes established and there's a migratory pathway now that birds know to follow, they release young birds near adult birds and they just follow them on their migration and they get to soar. So the idea behind this is to get at this idea of these different flight styles and which takes up more energy. So having your students flap their arms for a period of time and then hold them out straight like they're soaring for a period of time. And discussing which was harder, which was easier, and kind of making some connections to how birds travel. Another great activity you can pull out from Ruby's birds is getting into different wing shapes. So as we talked about, the illustrations of Ruby's bird features several different species of birds. There's peregrine falcon, there's a night heron, there's cowbirds and other songbirds featured. And so you can kind of get into this idea of different wing shapes. So there's 4 different types of wing shapes. Here you'll see pictured passive soaring, which are things like storks and hawks and eagles. So they're a little bit broader and long, and these are great for just hanging in the air. Then you get these really long, thin wings from the active stores like albatross and other seabirds. These are birds that spend a lot of their life on the wing. And then we've got other wing types as well, like the elliptical wing. These are more of like your songbirds. So these are, maybe I would consider these to be a little bit more maneuverable in tight spaces. And then you have things like high speed wings that you'll see in falcons and swifts and other birds that tend to eat on the wing, so catch things and eat them in the air, or like a falcon will catch other birds in the air. So a bird that needs speed to survive. And then from there, you take this activity to the next level by building paper airplanes and experimenting with the shape of the wings. So you can find on the website for this guide, this activity has some links to different types and shapes of airplanes that you can make. But you can also do all these great things where you modify them yourself. You can cut notches into them like feathers. You can add length to them with tape and other paper. So you can explore some of this idea of different wing shapes and different shapes of airplane wings as well. So those are some of the activities that you can pull from Ruby's birds. There are several more that focus on migration as well. So definitely worth checking out that guide. And I was trying to think. It'll come to me. There was one other thing that I wanted to share with you about Ruby's birds, but it'll come to me. Let's go ahead and move on to On Bird Hill. This is a book written by famous children's author Jane Yolen. And this book is a really charming, whimsical story about a boy going on a walk and exploring nature and then noticing a tree and examining that tree in all of its pieces and parts, from the trunk to the branch to the twig. and then noticing a white bird on its nest, and has these gorgeous whimsical illustrations that you can get some really wonderful content from. So these are some of the illustrations, and I'll just give you an idea for the writing. It's very lyrical and poetic. And on that twig I saw a nest, and in that nest a bird at rest. Beneath that bird there was an egg, a little chick, all beak, wing, leg. And so in this story, you can get into a little bit more about habitats and life cycles. And so that's where we draw a lot of these activity ideas from. So one of the activities, Baby Bird Run, fact or fiction. So this is another fun game where you can add some activity into it. You can play it like a typical true or false game, but we like to set it up with one side of the room as true and one side as false, and then have students physically move from one side to the other. So let's go ahead and play our true false game here. So let's start with number 1. All birds build nests, true or false? Oh my gosh, so many falses rolling in. How do you know? What evidence are you thinking of that some birds nest in the sand, so they scrape out, those are called scrape nests, so they might not build anything, they might just scrape something. Emily is bringing up that some birds lay eggs in other birds' nests. Yeah, like a brown-headed cowbird, an obligate brood parasite. They can't build their own nests anymore. They have to lay them in other birds' nests. Ah, I was waiting for this. I thought somebody might bring it up. Pat brought up penguins. Some penguins don't build nests at all. Some hold them on their feet, right? So yeah. On old world cuckoos as well. Yeah, so lots of great examples there. So this is one of the ways that I like to play the game as well, is you have the statement, you have somebody provide their evidence for why they chose their answer, and then you can ask students if they want to move, and provide them the opportunity to move based on the evidence of their peers. So that might depend on the age group you're working with. Number 2, some birds give birth to live babies rather than lay eggs. True or false? Nope. Says Pat. False. Yeah. Yes, you guys are correct. Birds lay hard-shelled eggs. That's one of the characteristics of what makes bird a bird. All right, number 3. Eggs and chicks are not always safe in their nest. True or false? Yeah, true. What comes to mind as evidence for this one? Snakes. Yeah, absolutely. Raccoons, other birds. Yeah, even weather. Absolutely. Yeah, so nests do provide protection, but they're not foolproof, right? So predators can find them, other birds can find them. Um, Weather can knock a nest out of the tree or young out of the nest. Absolutely. And this is a great opportunity for students to share observations. They might have seen a baby bird that fell out of a nest before. And so you can start having them tap into their own experiences here. How about number 4? Most baby birds are fed seeds and berries by their parents. True or false? Lots of falses. What comes to mind? And it says eagles. So raptors, birds of prey, they're not going to be eating seeds. They're going to be eating Fish, small prey animals. Amy's bringing up a lot of birds are going to be eating protein. They need things like insects and worms. Absolutely. There are very few strictly vegetarian birds. The only one I can think of in North America at the moment is the American goldfinch. And they have to nest later in the season than all the other birds because they have to wait for the flowers to go to seed. So they're nesting in June, July, August when other birds are starting in May as soon as they can. Yep. So that one is false. How about number 5? Birds can breathe inside their eggs before they hatch. Lots of trues rolling in. This one's a little harder. Yes. So eggs shells are semi-permeable membranes. So air and gas can pass through eggshells. Um, so one of the ways I think about this is, do I think that the first time a bird breathes is it when it comes out of the shell? So there's a stage in their development where they're relying on some of the air inside the shell, but at some point when they develop their lungs, they're able to um, have some of that gas exchange through the shell. Number 6, only the female mother bird sits on the eggs. True or false? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of falses roll in. Right. This might be true for some birds, but it's not true for everybody. So there are things like hummingbirds where the male, a lot of hummingbirds, I don't know if all hummingbirds, many hummingbird species, the male's never involved in the nest part of the, at all. It doesn't build the nest, doesn't protect the nest, doesn't sit on eggs, doesn't. Um, And in a lot of songbirds, the male might not sit on the eggs, but there are other species. Somebody brought up penguins where they exchange the eggs on their feet. Yes, eagle parents take turns. Absolutely. Lots of good examples out there. All right, how about number 7? This is one you'll hear from students sometimes, so this is a great one to address. Most birds live in their nests year-round. False, that's correct. Nests are for breeding pretty much exclusively. They're great as a little bit of added protection during this time when the young are so vulnerable, but there is a disadvantage to being predictable, right? To be going to the same spot over and over and over again. So at some point, it actually becomes less safe to visit a nest. So birds do not use their nests year round. All right, number 8, if you find a baby bird, you should try to feed it bread and milk. True or false? No, 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 I saw. False, correct. You should probably not try to feed it at all. So this is something you'll see people really get worried about as young birds and how try to take care of them in all sorts of different ways. Usually it's best to leave that to a rehabber if they need it at all. There's a great comic out there, which I should have thought to grab a link to, by Bird and Moon Comics, about when you should try to help a baby bird or not. And I'll see if I can find that and share that. Because yeah, generally, if you can tell that it's got some feathers on it, it's probably if it's got feathers, but not flying very well, it's probably a fledgling. And so it's just in the awkward teenage phase. It's got to go through it. It's fine. It's mom and dad are still paying attention. And you would only move that if um, it's in immediate danger of being like hit by a car or something. Amy's pointing out that a lot of departments of natural resources have great publications about orphaned wildlife and what to do if you find them. Awesome. I love that. Lots of great resources out for those things. If you find a naked baby bird and you can see the nest, you can try and put it back in. Otherwise, you might have to go the rehab route if there's a local one. Okay, great. So that nests and breeding are a real big theme of this book because the illustrations and the story are so wonderful around this. So the next activity I want to talk about really just gets into asking what your students already know about nests and eggs, where they've seen them before, what the nests look like, what do they know about what nests are used for, and just kind of dives into their background knowledge about nests. And you kind of build together your idea of what nests are for as a class. And that builds into one of my favorite activities, which is building your own nest. This is a super fun activity to do with students of all ages. Little kids are great at it. I've done it with high schoolers. You can do it with, I've done it with adults, and it's usually pretty fun. There's all sorts of ways you can adapt it to different age groups. So you've built up this idea of what nests are. You've looked at the illustration in the last activity of the nest in the book and talked about what nests might be made of. And so now you talk about different materials that might be in it. You brainstorm different materials. Then you actually go outside and try and build your own nest with natural materials. This is a really great activity to tailor to your students' age and ability. So you could have them just build their own nest on the ground. You could have them try to build one that can sit on a branch. You can try to have them build one that's strong enough to hold rocks, which would be the eggs. So there's all sorts of ways you can make this a really fun, involved activity. And you can even, sometimes kids will, if you want to get into this idea that birds build these really incredible structures with their beaks. They don't have thumbs, they don't have hands, they build them with their beaks. So some kids will get really excited about trying to build the bird nest with just their hands in like a mitten shape. So you can kind of like uh, tape the fingers together. You don't have to tape them, but you could have them try and hold their hands in like a beak shape and try and build the nest that way. So super fun activity. Some tips for doing this is be sure you set your boundaries, check the area for harmful plants, talk about whether you want them to pick things or just use things that are on the ground. If there is mud, they will become part of your nests. But that's okay because birds use mud too. So if you're okay with students getting muddy, that can be a really fun way to build a nest as well. Jean is adding a suggestion of using clothespins for beaks. That sounds super challenging. I like it. It sounds very fun. So this is a really fun activity to do with your students. If you can't get outside to do it because of the weather, you can also do it with a lot of craft supplies inside as well. This is another of my favorite activities, the egg exploration, and I will not apologize for the pun in the title of this activity. It is inspired by this gorgeous illustration featured here, where the inside of the eggshell looks like a house on a hill. And it gets at this idea that this eggshell has been the home for this little bird. And the idea is to actually do like a chicken egg dissection. So open up an egg and actually look at it. A lot of young kids haven't really had the opportunity to do this. And I don't, when I'm cracking an egg, I'm not sitting there and thinking about what the structures are and how it works. So it can be a really fun thing to do. So there's this great diagram here that shows the different parts of an egg. You'll see pictured the air cell and the yolk. The albumin is the white, and then this kind of white string that like structure that you can see even on the cracked egg. That's the chalaza, and that helps kind of hold the egg yolk in place. If it's a fertilized egg, you might see the germinal disc, which is what will actually turn into the embryo and then the chick. And on unfertilized eggs, you won't see it, but on some eggs, you will. And it can be really interesting because some students will think that the yolk is what turns into the chick, but the yolk is the food, right? The food for the chick, and the germinal disc is attached to the yolk, and that is what turns into the chick eventually. Super fun activity to do with kids, a little messy, but totally worth it. Amy is sharing that there's some 4-H programs that do a chick quest program. So raising chickens from egg to chick in the classroom, and could be a great partner. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Amy. All right, we're going to dive into the last book we'll talk about tonight, which is An Eagle's Feather. So this is a little bit different from the books that we've talked about. This is about a bird species found in the Philippines. So this is about the Philippine eagle, and it's about the bird Kalayan, who was a young Philippine eagle and was flying over its forest one day and got shot by a hunter and then was taken in and rehabbed. And so you get to hear about kind of this conservation story from the perspective of the eagle. So this gets into bird biology, so what these birds need to live, as well as conservation. And this is for a slightly older age group. So this guide was designed for K through 5th grade. What's really cool about this is if for whatever reason you can't get your hands on the book, there's actually a read along it's not even a read along, it's a special animation that was done to this story. I'll just play a very super quick clip of it just to give you an idea of the story and the illustrations.
An Eagle's Feather by Men Fung Ho. Illustrations by Francis Alvarez. Flying high above the forest of Tambala at sunrise, Kalian spots a monkey. Food. The young Philippine eagle swoops down to follow the monkey. Where did it go? On and on, Kalian flies in pursuit of it. He notices the landscape below changing. Where are the trees? Where are the animals? Who are those people? Scared, he turns to fly back when, boom! There's a shotgun blast and a sharp pain in his wing. In a flurry of feathers and blood, he starts to fall and keeps falling. Kalian crashes onto the hard ground. He is dazed and weak, unable to get up. Suddenly, he hears footsteps and voices approaching. What is happening? He's been shot, Father. Kalian hears a boy's voice shouting. Must be a hunter nearby. Hurry! Kalian feels the gentle touch of small hands and big strong arms wrapping him in a cloth and carrying him. Then everything turns dark.
So I'm just going to stop it there. I just wanted you to get an idea of the story. What I like about this story is that it has a conservation message, and it does talk about human-caused habitat destruction and hunting and how that's affecting these birds. But then it also has the flip side of that story where it features the Philippine eagle, is it Trust, that is doing this rehab work and helping heal these birds and return them and doing great community work to help protect their habitats. So it has both sides of the story. and it gets into this idea of conservation in a pretty powerful way that leads to a great opportunity to open discussions. Sorry. So we start out this guide by looking at habitat, because habitat destruction is a big part of the Philippine eagle's story. So it gets into what are the components of a habitat and has you do some visual organization with your students to get at that. And you can even go back through the book and look for examples in the story of all these different things, the food, cover, water, and space that Philippine eagle needs to survive. And you can find most of these in the story and in the illustrations. We also get into the ways that Philippine eagles hunt. So the third activity, swooping for supper, talks about the hunting methods that Philippine eagles use. So still hunting and perch hunting. And so it involves swooping and gliding and using those techniques to get at food. And you do see this in the story as well. And it features this really great video taken from the Bird of Prey documentary that actually lets you see the eagles and learn a little bit more about their hunting adaptations. So I'll go ahead and play that. But real quick, I did see there was a question in the chat window. The story, the Philippine eagle story, so an eagle's feather, is the link that Steph just shared. And that video that I played reading the story is linked on that page as well. So the guide, the resources, and that video are all on that page. So let's see these awesome birds in action.
The Philippine eagle is a top predator here in the Philippines. There's nothing like it. It's got this beautiful crest that stands up, and it's got these beautiful blue eyes. Its eyes are amazingly acute, probably 5 to 10 times more acute and more sensitive than our eyes are. Nothing escapes them. And it's huge because it has to take large animals as prey. It's got bone-crushing, powerful feet. And they can easily handle an animal the size of a small deer, or certainly a monkey, with no problem at all. It's got broad, long wings with a wingspread of about 7 feet. And it's got this long tail that it uses as a rudder to steer within the canopy, within the vegetation, going through small gaps in between branches, chasing animals. It's a very efficient hunter. It's a very opportunistic hunter. Basically, it will hunt anything it can catch in this environment.
I think they're just such gorgeous birds. It's easy to see how they can be so charismatic and how there's a whole group dedicated to their preservation. So the rest of this activity, once you've talked about how these birds hunt and you viewed this video, is playing a game of predator tag. So featuring the great Philippine eagle and one of their favorite prey animals, the Philippine flying lemur. Using hula hoops to set up as trees or safe spaces. You have some students designated as eagles and some designated as lemurs. And the challenge is to tag as many lemurs as you can. And they can only be tagged when they're moving between the trees or the safe spaces. super fun game to play. You can make all sorts of adaptations. You can choose to have, once a child is tagged, they go back to the eagle's nest and they're out for the rest of that round, or they could become eagles until you don't have any lemurs left. Lots of fun ways to play this game. All right. And then we start to get into this idea of conservation. So we start comparing what we know about Philippine eagles and what we can learn about bald eagles. So we can make some connections to birds in our own areas. So what do these two different species of eagles that have a lot of cultural importance in their own areas, what do they have in common? Another fun activity from this is looking at the wingspan of the Great Philippine Eagle. So their wingspan is anywhere from 6 to 7 feet, which is pretty difficult to picture. It's pretty enormous wingspan. So this activity guides you through making your own set of wings at that length and then letting students try them out and getting a sense for how truly enormous these birds are. There's also several activities in here that get into the more conservation side. So there's one about making posters about the Philippine eagle that uses information from the Philippine Eagle Project. And then there's a community and conservation, this activity, which is about extending this care that we see extended to the Philippine eagle to other endangered birds and learning about ones from our own area. And then asking some great discussion questions, getting into like, is the world a safe place for all animals and plants, and why or why not? Why is it important to conserve endangered species, and how do you feel about the problems that they're facing? So kind of getting into these deeper topics that this story allows us to explore and provides a really great scaffold for us to look at. We are running out of time, so I'm rushing through this one a little bit because I want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask any questions if you have them. And while you're thinking, I want to just say, please feel free to keep in touch with us. If you have any questions about tonight's material or other material, you can always reach out to us at k12lab@cornell.edu. That is our team's email, so you can always reach us there. And if you are interested in a completion letters for 1 contact hour, please do email us at k12lab@cornell.edu and we'll send you one of those. Again, we will be sure to share the link to the recording and the links that we discussed in this webinar in our follow-up email. Look for that by the end of this week. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Did see a question come in. Wendy's asking, are there any links to citizen science projects that could extend the learning from these stories? Yeah, so there's a few citizen science projects that I think would make great connections to these stories. There's Nest Watch, so looking and monitoring nests in your own area. I mean, that's a pretty seasonally restricted project, so it'll be a spring or summer thing, but great complement to both the On Bird Hill story as well as this story, which talks about nesting birds. There is, I mean, eBird comes to mind because you can just monitor birds around you. It's a great way to find birds. It's also a great resource for looking at maps for migratory birds, so things like from Ruby's birds. So actually eBird would be a great place to go to look up birds around you that you might see like Ruby saw on a nearby walk and learn about those. If there are, sometimes the guides will have some participatory or citizen science connections, but sometimes they won't. But there's lots of great connections that you can draw, but the two that come to mind for the projects, or excuse me, the stories we discussed today are eBird and Nest Watch. Yeah, Feeder Watch is another great participatory science project. That one would make a great connection to our Crow Not Crow book. I didn't talk about it today, but that's a book about learning to identify birds and features a bird feeder in the book. So we actually have an activity in that guide where you engineer your own feeder, and Feeder Watch would be a fantastic tie-in to that guide and story, because you could then see if birds come to your engineered feeder and report them to as a participatory or citizen science project. And it is another one that's kind of seasonally restricted, so that one runs November to April. Yes, so thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Please feel free to keep any questions coming in the chat window if you have them. Otherwise, I hope you'll consider joining us for a future webinar. Next month, we are talking about bird clubs and how to start one of those. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, but please feel free to email us if you have any questions in the future. Take care, everyone.